Mowi. It's a dirty name synonymous with global salmon farming production. In fact, it is the world's biggest producer, a multi-billion euro corporation that seeks to ever expand its footprint, and all the while at the expense of wild salmon and the environment. Mowi is so called because it is taken from the Mowinckels family name of Norwegian salmon farmers who began to turn their hobby into a business in the 1970s and 80s, but then saw what salmon farming was doing to the fish and the environment. Despite the opposition of generations of the Mowinckel family, the company Mowi, Mowi, came into being, and the rest, as we know, is history. For this episode of The Last Salmon, I'm joined by one of those Mowinckels, Frederik, a self-described eco-industrialist who has spent much of his career trying to shine a light on the questionable and immoral practices of salmon farming companies around the world. It's an absolutely fascinating conversation with someone whose family were at the very genesis of the salmon aquaculture industry in Norway, and who now, through his own singular share in Mowi, continues to be an activist shareholder, agitating against their business model. But as Frederik also points out, you can still be eco-conscious and successful in business, and there is no reason why, except for money, salmon farming companies can't change their ways. First though, Frederik takes us back to the early days in Norway when his family first began salmon farming, and times were a lot more innocent.
In 1964, my father's cousin, Johan Ernst Mowinckel, founded, together with his partner, the Mowi company. It started out as a small extra way for farmers along the west coast of Norway to make a bit of extra money. They had a few cows, they had a few sheep, and they had a few salmon running in a pen outside their farm. Tor Mowinkel, the son, took over. He is my second cousin, and he was hired to to promote the salmon around the world, and he did an amazing job. The whole family was invested, and my uncle was on the board, and we kept this going until the 1985, I think, when big shareholders decided to take the company in a direction that we didn't want to be part of. Money became far more important than supporting the local farmers. Money became more important than looking after the environment, and we decided to leave the company completely. And we've not been a shareholder since, except for my one share that I now have in order for the company to invite me to their annual meetings.
Paint a picture for us, if you will, about the state of Norwegian aquaculture or salmon farming. Let's be specific. Salmon farming in Norway in the 1980s, when your family made that decision. It sounded like it was a pretty pinnacle decade.
Yes, it was, and there was incredible pressure on growth. There were more and more farms coming up. The smaller farms were bought up, and it turned into a big industrial feedlot, similar to what we have today. This consolidation has continued, of course, and eventually ended up with 5-6 families who now pretty much control the global salmon industry.
Wow. So did you have a pivotal moment where you thought, I have to disassociate myself from this because of what you witnessed? And if you did, what was it that made you pivot like that?
So in 1985, I was not involved because I was simply too young to be very much involved, and I had just moved to the United States to study. But this was basically a decision that either the family continued down the road of industrial feedlots, or we pulled out. Personally, I had a pivotal moment in 2001. When was on a flight, and I met somebody who basically explained to me in very simple terms, you can be a businessman and you can make money doing what's right for the environment all at the same time. So I flew back to London. I told my wife we have to sell the Range Rover. We're buying a Prius. All activities that wasn't related to the environment was then sold, and has been my sort of sole focus on a 50-50 basis as an eco-industrialist and an environmental activist. The big change with salmon farming came a little bit later. We have a wonderful summer house on an island outside of Bergen, where we went for silence, we went there for darkness, and we went there for an unobstructed view. A salmon farm was installed right in front of us, and we lost all of that. That got me interested, particularly because of the pollution that ended up on our shores, the fish that disappeared from our little harbor, the birds that disappeared, and there was no more fish for us to fish in the fjord. We usually, went out when we needed dinner and was able to catch something in the fjord. All that disappeared. I found it. I found it curious. Also, the secrecy around it. You're not allowed to go anywhere near the farm. You're not allowed. You don't get any answers when you ask questions. And I said I'm going to spend a substantial amount of time during the rest of my life to get to the bottom of this. The more I discovered, the more clear it was that I have to tell as many people as possible all over the world what enormous environmental damage salmon farming in open pens are doing to nature. That's all I'm doing, Jim. I am telling the world about the damage being caused. If people still want to be salmon farmers, if people still want to invest in salmon shares, if they still want to eat salmon, that's up to them. But they can never tell me that they didn't know.
What's particularly interesting about you as an advocate, just going back to your family history, is that do you know people who work?
I know people. One of my good friends here in Portugal is very much involved, and of course, you just like in politics and farm salmon, you try to keep it off the out of the dinner conversation, and you agree to disagree. So I have no issues with that. But if they want to pick a fight with me, I'm well equipped.
What is it that you are calling for from the salmon farming industry? Are you calling for these open nets to be closed containment pens? Are you calling for these closed containment pens to be out of the ocean? Because obviously there's a spectrum really of solutions or mitigations that we believe are out there and low hanging fruit. What would you ideally want? What's your goal?
A lot of people say you have to come up with a solution, and I'm saying no. I don't have to come up with a solution. The industry has to come up with a solution. So that's the first point. My view on this is that if we're going to farm salmon, it has to be in a completely closed system so that we control what goes in and what comes out, just like any reasonably run factory. Now, am I promoting salmon farming on land in a closed system, a RAS system, flow through, all of that? I'm not promoting any of it. And it's not my job to come up with a solution for the industry. If I have a problem in my factory, I can't just tell the government, well, you have to come up with a solution then. It's not how it works.
There's echoes here of the water industry here in the UK, which I'm sure you've read and know all about. Profiteering off the environment, making big fat checks of dividends to shareholders, bonuses to C-level execs, etc., etc. You know the drill, same business model. The problem is in both these industries, which try and take a leaf out of your book and try and be as vocal as I can in spreading the word and making people be aware of the situation, is the lack of regulation from government, right?
Yes, but it's also a lack of self-regulation and a moral duty. These companies know exactly what they're doing. The salmon farmers are very aware of the damage they're causing to wild salmon, and to the environment, to crustaceans, to the seabed. Now there's a large portion of the wild salmon in Norway, which is now, by the way, only 1% of compared to the farm salmon. There's no proof beyond any doubt that even the wild salmon now has part of farm salmon genes in them, which means that they are going to be less suited for the long journey that they set out to into the open ocean, and not to mention trying to come back up the river to spawn later on. So they are the salmon industry. Yes, together with some other, climate change is super important and an important factor. But the thing is that salmon farming we know that that's damaging, and we know we can do something about it. So why focus on all the things that we cannot do something about?
Yeah.
When we can, let's start with what is right in front of us.
So just keeping on in the thread of regulation or lack of, and as you quite rightly point out, the people involved who are making the big decisions in the salmon industry and, dare I say it, the water industry know full well that ethically it's very anti-environment, that it's unsustainable despite the boasts to the contrary. The Norwegians are the godfathers of salmon farming, as we know, and they've been perfecting this sorcery for decades now.
Well, they perfected the way of making money.
Exactly. And we've seen the wild salmon stocks fall off a cliff in Norway because of this, and it's irrefutable, the proof of that. It's not like, at the moment Scotland will argue that there's no real conclusive evidence that aquaculture has any bearing on the wild stock. And, if we say, well, fine, well, just look at Norway, it's living proof. Yet I interviewed the equivalent of the environmental minister for Norway about this very matter, about regulation. You're closing key salmon rivers now because the wild stock are so poor. A lot of the pressures that are put on them are undeniably from the fish pens that are in the bottom of those rivers. There are dead rivers in Norway, completely dead salmon rivers that have been killed by aquaculture. The altar, your most famous jewel in the crown, has been heavily inflicted because of aquaculture. What are you going to do? Do you recognize this? His answer was, I believe, or my interpretation of it was that, well, yes, we do recognize that regulation needs to catch up. So we're going to pass the baton to the aquaculture industry to tell us what they're going to do about it, because we believe it is up to them to make good, mark their own homework. And this sent alarm bells to me, because this is exactly what our government does in this country to the water industry, to the private water companies. They go, we don't know, we can't keep up with your technological progress, with your legal resource, with your lobbying. We just don't, we're not a big enough power even as government to regulate you. So we're putting it over to you, and it's on your conscience to try and fix it. That's the impression I got. Tell me to the contrary. And if you can't, tell me, why has Norway, even after 70 years nearly of this carnage, of this ever-increasing carnage, why are they still not getting a handle on it as a government?
No, you're absolutely right. I did hear this from the minister, and I'm not really surprised. The book, again, the New Fish describes in detail how the industry have basically said, "Catch me if you can."
That's it, isn't it?
And and there's no reason why they shouldn't just continue. They've been doing this for 60 years, 60, 70 years. This is self-regulating. I mean, we have examples where the salmon farmers report how many salmon that has escaped, and we have examples where the fjord is full of farmed salmon. You know, nobody knows where it's coming from. And there might be a report that said, we might have lost 1 or 2 salmon during a sort of a transfer from a wellboat to a farm. It's self-reporting. I mean, it's never worked in any other industry. So why on earth should it work in this industry?
I guess one of the reasons why I'm asking that question is because you have the benefit of hindsight. You have 6, 7 decades behind you. And nothing has changed between the relationship between government and aquaculture. And we've seen the catastrophic outcome of that in the environment. So it doesn't take a genius to look in of Scotland, which is where I'm interested in it all. But Scotland, Iceland is has a very young aquaculture industry. Their tentacles are advancing globally all the time. They're pushing for new licenses. Occasionally they get pushed back, and we have small wins. I wouldn't say small wins. We have wins in BC and Washington, but fundamentally they're a growing industry. They have this wonderful line, don't they, which we heard a lot at the Salmon Summit: as the world is growing, the world needs to be fed. Isn't that interesting? They've taken it upon their own shoulders to feed the world.
Yeah. So help me with this one, Jim. You steal 1 kilo of fish from the poor in Africa. You grind it up into fish oil and fish meal. You make pellets out of the meal. You ship it to Norway and to Scotland. You feed the salmon so that you get 1 kilo of salmon so the rich people can eat. And then you fly it around the world.
Salmon now is affordable. It's an affordable protein. They've done a genius piece of marketing. Think of sushi, for instance. Think of, any supermarket in Europe and in America. You can go in and buy very, very, very cheap Atlantic salmon, and people are very happy to believe that is a healthy, affordable protein that they can feed their family with. And that is the greatest trick the devil ever pulled, as far as I'm concerned. But so just going back to what we were talking about, let's assume that the governments are never going to get on top of regulating this industry to the point where it's going to be beneficial to the environment or indeed the health of the customers. So we have to look at the other end of the stick, don't we? We have to look at us, the consumer. That's the only real way to change policy, I think, of this industry. Now, you and I and many other people we know, and thankfully it's growing by the day. As soon as they become aware, then they have the choices whether they want to buy farm salmon or not. And I'm pleased to say a lot of people make the right choice as far as I'm concerned. What more can we do if we're to steer the industry from the consumer end? How can we do that?
There are various ways. We can inform them about the way that salmon is farmed, the amount of chemicals that goes into the feed process, making the feed, transporting the feed, and then feeding the salmon. Don't forget that farm salmon is actually gray before they artificially color it. Most people don't know that.
It's very symbolic of the duplicity, isn't it, of this industry?
You wouldn't buy a gray fish, so they had to color it. So, but then what we also and we need to hit the consumers reasonably hard. So one of the projects we have now is a US-based hard hitting top film that we are putting together with the focus on the human health aspects of eating farmed salmon. So that's if all goes to plan, that's going to be a real wake up call for a lot of people. Another group that we need to make aware of this are the boards, for example, of the big supermarkets. Because they are ultimately responsible for what they are putting in their supermarkets, and people in turn eat. So we see that there are very little knowledge about the among the board members of these big supermarkets of the what a farmed salmon actually is. So that's another angle. It also eventually goes to the consumers. And then another aspect that we are looking at is that we need to follow the money. Who is actually funding these companies? Who's lending money to them? Who are the bondholders? All of that. So we're doing a deep dive on that as well. And again, most people wouldn't know that their bank, their local bank, is a big funder of something that they might be completely opposed to. So follow the money and informing the customers. That is basically what we do. The salmon farmers are not going to listen. They are superior. They are only going to react when they realize that they're going to lose their money or they're going to lose their customers.
It seems to be such an obvious and easy comparison to compare the salmon farming industry to the private water companies in England who are financed by big offshore banks, financial institutions, private equity, and otherwise, with people who have zero skin in the game. And by that, I mean they're not interested in the environment. It's not their environment in the first place. They're just interested in numbers and profit. And I think that story resonates a lot in the, certainly resonated a lot within the UK when the public found out just what the financial model was of the water companies and the industry as a whole since we privatized it. And it's very similar, or not dissimilar, to aquaculture. And I think you're right. I think to spread awareness on the money is something that people feel very, very strongly about, because we can hit the banks if, as you're alluding, they may be high street banks, they may be household names when it comes to who invests in these companies, naming and shaming, for want of a better expression.
100%. And there's a strong connection between the water companies and the salmon farming companies, because they're both damaging water systems. They're both damaging the habitat for the wild salmon and trout. So there's lots of parallels there.
Are you as frustrated, dumbfounded, and flabbergasted as I am with the lack of attention still on saving this wonderful wild fish?
Yes, I am, and I used to be very angry. And sometimes I do get still angry about this, but I have just decided I'm going to do what I know is right and what I can do. So I am currently devoting probably up to 50% of my day to these salmon issues. I'm very happy doing that, and I just think that it is important. I mean, salmon is the king of fish, and if we can't do whatever possible to save it, then that won't go very well down with my family, and I mean, we've been fishing for since we came to Bergen in the mid 1700s, right? I mean, this is all part of the family, and now I can't fish anymore because there's hardly any salmon left.
So it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, it is a culture, and it's a huge earner for the local communities. But it's a renewable earner as fish farm as opposed to fish farming, which is short term. I mean, what is going to happen automatically by climate change is that within 10 years probably, I don't think you can farm salmon in Scotland anymore because the waters will be too warm.
Maybe
you go further and further north. Norway can go a little further north, but then you meet hostile weather conditions and a lot more, sort of difficult weather environment. But then another issue is the government is saying, oh, we need to look at closed farms. Well, Jim, if you can mimic a Scottish law in a tank, why would you put it in the Hebrides? Why on earth would you would put it 2 hours north of Manhattan, or just outside of Miami, or just south of Tokyo? There is as much CO2 emissions from flying salmon around the world from Norway as all the domestic flights in Norway combined. That's insane.
So that's something that's very rarely discussed, isn't it? The carbon footprint. I mean, we know industry as a whole, people will argue is an irrefutable carbon footprint, but a necessary one to move things around the world for people. The salmon farming industry, I'd imagine the carbon footprint is colossal.
Well, if you ask them, they say, no, it's less than chicken and less than other things. And when you then say, do you include scope 3? Which is getting it from the factory gate to the customer. They say, oh, no, we don't do that. So, so unless everybody on that one island, the Outer Hebrides, eats all the salmon, then you have a relatively low carbon footprint. But as soon as you are flying it to Miami, the situation is completely changed.
One of my biggest challenges, and I think for lobbyists in general who are trying to spread awareness about the pitfalls of eating farmed salmon, is when you're trying to convince people that it's bad for the wild salmon stock, and they can wrap their head around, I see, we're not eating the fish from the river, they're in farms and they're designed fish, they're genetically modified fish that are in pens, and they get it. And they get the sea lice and they get the escapee threats and all that. But fundamentally, a lot of people go, okay, but if we lose salmon, besides anglers, who's really going to care? I don't really care. I mean, I care about the polar bear, I care about the orangutan, but it's not going to make any difference to my life if we lose salmon. So then I start talking about how important they are as keystone species, the cultural value of these fish to the Norwegians, but to us, to the Europeans in general, to the whole of the North Atlantic basin, and how old this fish is, the provenance of this fish, the romance of this fish, etc., etc. Is there anything I'm missing? Because not a lot of people, but some people are still unmoved. What else can I tell people? Can I glean any information that I haven't already heard that will convince somebody that a wild salmon is a precious, precious animal?
Well, I think the most important thing is that, the fact that the polar bear gets in trouble is because of climate change. And it's not something we can immediately do something about. We can slow it down, and we can do that. Killing off the wild salmon would be one of the first, if not the first species that an industry have killed off. And the governments are well aware of the issues. They have left the industry to self-regulate itself. We know that they can't do that. It's not human to actually self-regulate. So I believe we're writing history here with the first species known to everybody, and it's happening on our watch, and it's completely unnecessary.
We can stop it.
Yeah, I am absolutely certain we can stop it. Now, a lot of people will disagree with me that I think we have to stop for a longer period of time, unfortunately, and this is where the government should help. We have to stop fishing for salmon in certain areas.
You're talking about angling for wild salmon?
Yeah, and I know that there's not going to be a very popular comment, but I think we have to do that. We have to do that, and you have the whole thing with catch and release, and all of that. Well, it's questionable from an animal welfare point of view. So that's why I stopped fishing for salmon altogether, because I said I'm going to do my part in trying to save this, to save the king. When you get to a point where you realize that what you're doing is not right, then you have to stop. I mean, nobody smokes on airplanes anymore.
If we really want to do something as a society, we can pivot so quickly. I mean, within a decade, smoking, people still smoke, but smoking has become an antisocial, completely recognized, very anti-health pastime.
Nobody is saying that, I didn't know it was hazardous to smoke anymore.
Mm.
Right?
No, no. But farming salmon, as
Exactly.
pretty much
exactly. We just need to.
conclusive evidence that it's detrimental to the environment and is accelerating the demise of an endangered species. It seems to be an increasingly growing, and the regulations, all bets are off still. And as a lot of our governments turn more towards profiteering and capitalism, and dare I say it, right wing, aquaculture benefits from that too.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, most governments are bankrupt, so they have to, they'll do whatever they think is good, in order to win the next election and to survive to the next election.
Which is why this fish is such a political fish. There's almost an uncomfortable conflict, isn't there? The brand Norway, I think, obviously their biggest export is the oil. The oil industry is huge. Second biggest aquaculture, farm salmon.
Well, they call it fisheries or seafood, but of course, there's a lot mixed in there. But salmon is a big export, no doubt about that. Norway, for some reason, still has an incredibly good image when it comes to the environment. I've always been puzzled. Now, I haven't lived in Norway for many, many years now, so I'm more a foreigner looking in than I am actually somebody who's lived in Norway my whole life. But in 1987, there was an UN report that was written by Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was the former Prime Minister of Norway, and before that, she was the environmental minister. And basically, this report is called Our Common Future, and it lines out the what we need to do, how we need to cooperate, and how we need to save the nature and the environment and the ocean, all elements of it, in order to live in a peaceful and in a healthy world for many, many years to come. This, I think, was the absolute pinnacle of the Norwegian country being the ultimate sort of environmentally conscious nation. Since that, it has gone completely downhill, in my opinion. We actually donate 400 million pounds a year to the Rainforest Fund, which basically is we'll pay for somebody else to do the right thing. Yeah. Norway is completely intoxicated on oil and gas. We are one of three countries, the others are Papua New Guinea and Indonesia, who let mine tailings go straight into the ocean, into the fjords even. We're one of few countries who still hunt for whales. We have a energy consumption which is 5 times higher than the UK per capita. So yes, we have electric vehicles. People saying, "Oh, but you have electric vehicles. You're so." Yeah, you know why? Because there are no tax on them. People are not interested in driving an electric car. They're interested in as much car as possible for the money, and that's what they get with an electric car. You get a car that can accelerate as fast as a Ferrari, and you get it for a third of the price by buying a Tesla or some other electric car, electric Porsche or whatever. I mean, it's and we have managed to we've talked about salmon farming, right? I mean, Norway is not a very environmentally friendly country. Full stop. But we have an amazing self-image, and also they've done great PR in sort of promoting us. And yes, we have lots of nature still, and there are like 5 million people living in a country the size of France. So of course there's lots of nature because people are not living everywhere. So it's embarrassing, I think, particularly the deep sea mining thing. They were the last country to sort of say, okay, well, we'll put a halt on it, but we really want to do it.
So this brand, as people become more and more aware of the provenance of this fish and it being very much a Norwegian creation, It's hopefully going to sit more and more uneasily with the good people of Norway. I'm not talking about those necessarily in power, and those with their hands on the levers. I'm talking about the democracy of the Norwegian people will suddenly start to become aware that their brand is being unfairly represented internationally, and that I think can't be underplayed. I think that is something that we as anti-aquaculture lobbyists, or shall I say anti-open salmon pens to be specific, lobbyists should really pay attention to.
Yeah, and unfortunately, when you are right in the middle of it, you're the last one to discover it. So the politicians, as we saw in London, I mean, the Minister of Environment, lovely young guy, but he clearly doesn't get it.
No, he doesn't. Let's bounce off the bottom now, because we try and thread some hope into the show, to be made aware of what's going on in the back room, shall I say, and the network of support and resource that is there quietly and feverishly working away on behalf of the wild salmon was very, very reassuring and very heartening for me. Talk to me, if you will, to the hope of saving the wild fish.
With the direct reference to the conference in London, I think I would say that one or two phone calls that I have received since has given me hope that more organizations will be more firm in their opinion regarding salmon farming in open pens. They have basically asked me for advice on how they can sort of move in that direction, which is great, because diddle-daddling around this is not going to do anything. Taking money from the industry is death for any sort of dialogue with the rest of us, and I think that people in these more conservative organizations are realizing that the salmon industry is just running circles around them, and they will never make any progress by sitting there around the table with them. There's only one language they understand. Another thing that is encouraging is that salmon farming and the problems around salmon farming is becoming a product that more and more NGOs consider an interesting product to present. And an NGO is like a business. You have money coming in and you have money going out, and you need a product to make sure that you get the money in. And I believe that we're going to see more of the big international NGOs putting salmon farming up as one of their products that they are going to promote and sell, if you want, to their members. So that is probably the biggest sort of two hopes that I got from the London event. On a more general basis, I would say there are lots of family offices and family foundations that are now funding the work that we're doing. Again, because we have a good product.
Yeah.
They want to be part of it. So I'm optimistic, but we have to work. This is death by 1,000 cuts, and we need to work everywhere, on all fronts, all over the world, with as many people as possible as we can. And I think there is a shift. There's a shift. It happened last year. I think the industry has starting to become a little bit rattled. And what's great for us, I probably shouldn't say this, but what's great for us is that they're not used to competition, and they are not used to people talking, coming up with good arguments against what they're doing. So they are actually behind. We are much better prepared for this fight than they are.
I couldn't have put that better myself. It feels like there's a united front now. The comms lines are open. The public, the consumers are beginning to have the scales pulled away from their eyes about the nefarious practices of this industry, or at least They know that they're perhaps not being told the whole truth, and the branding of this fish and the claims of how healthy it is and how they're feeding the world and all this other pious nonsense. I feel this movement too, and it's exciting, certainly, to be at the forefront of it. We ask all our guests, I think this leads neatly into these questions, 3 questions. I think you're going to have 1,000,001 answers, but you've had these questions for a few days now, so hopefully you're going to give us a key answer to the first one. Here it is, Frederik. If you had $1 billion, euros, pounds, to help save the wild salmon, how would you spend it?
Well, first of all, I hope I never have to, spend $1 million. That would make me make me very uncomfortable. But I would put together the absolute dream team, and I would travel around the world and tell as many people as possible, high up, whoever we could get in front of, and I will tell them the truth about the environmental damages that being caused by salmon farming. But I would put together an amazing team. And I know definitely a handful of people I would bring on that team, and I would just spend that money traveling around the world and spread this information.
Okay, so it would be a huge campaign, massive campaign trail. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, but personal, speeches and movies, films, and I would just make sure I would do a billion times more than what I'm already doing, but just to have that.
If you had no money, what would you do to save the wild salmon?
Ask in the supermarket where does the salmon come from? Use the internet to see, basically, make sure that they know, what the salmon has been fed. If you then stop eating salmon, tell your neighbors. If somebody asks for if you have any food allergies, tell them that you're allergic to farmed salmon.
My conscience is allergic to farmed salmon. I like it. All you chefs, if you're listening, Off the Table, and all you people that order salmon in restaurants, go and have a look at offthetable.org or on social media feeds. It's your last day on Earth, Frederik, and you have to spend it fishing. Now, we know that you hung up your salmon rod because how could you be the advocate that you are and then go and catch wild salmon? I can understand that. For the sake of the podcast, your last day on Earth, where would you fish and who would it be with?
I hung up my salmon rod. I didn't hang up my trout rod. So that's an easy answer to that. It would be fishing one of the mountain lochs in Norway on the Hardanger Plateau in western Norway with my dad. And we will catch 1 or 2 little brown trouts, and we will fry them on a frying pan over an open fire right there and then. And if my 2 boys would come along, that would be even better.
How lovely. It's interesting. Everybody, and why wouldn't they talk about fishing with their siblings or their father, alive or dead? It's a very familial pursuit, isn't it? It's a very close-knit thing to go fishing. You only ever go fishing with people you care about, I think. Frederik, thank you so much. What Frederik does cannot be underestimated. Frederik, I know I keep saying this, but he is a facilitator. He is an introducer. He's a consigliere. He is somebody who connects people to make things happen. We normally hear about the shouty campaigners and the big social media campaigns, and there's a place for everybody and all manner of NGOs. But really, what goes on behind the scenes, the quiet, diligent introductions are the things that push things forward in this space and indeed everywhere. And Frederik is a key player in that, and we are very lucky to have you on the show. So thank you very much, Frederik. Keep doing what you're doing and keep us informed. We're fascinated.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Jim, for your excellent podcasts. And it's all part of the 1,000 cuts that we need to end this industry in its current form.
We'll keep sharpening our blade, I promise you.
Thank you very much.
My thanks to Frederik Mowinckels for joining me. And on the next episode of The Last Salmon, Charles Rangeley Wilson, on our very own white rhino, the very rare and the acutely endangered English chalkstream salmon.
They're at 1 minute to midnight, and yet they've been there for 2 million years.
And the ambitious project that is aiming to halt its demise.
When we put all the wiggles back and it's full of trees and wildness, so let's give them a helping hand. I hope that would be an idea people would embrace, and it would be like, well, what have we got to lose?
Listen and follow The Last Salmon on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember to keep in the fight for our salmon. The Last Salmon Season 2 is supported by the Missing Salmon Alliance.